I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today we are going to talk about a resident at Angola who at one time was the most feared gangster in New Orleans, and his name was Telly Hankton. Now, it was 2011 when Telly Hankton really got on the radar anywhere outside of New Orleans. Now, inside of New Orleans, he was very well known, but how he got to be a household name was when the then New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu held a press conference after the murder of a bar manager at a daiquiri shop. This was on South Claiborne Avenue in the French Quarter, and it's called Jazz Daiquiri. Now, before we go any further, let me quickly explain something as it relates to how things work inside of New Orleans. The gang activity, the drug activity, typically stay out of the French Quarter. And there's good reason for that. New Orleans' economy is largely dependent on tourism. Nearly 20 million people travel to the Crescent City each year. Super Bowls are played there. Taylor Swift toured there. In 2024 alone, tourists spent over $10 billion with a B inside the city. So there's an understanding with the gangsters and the drug dealers. They know, don't fuck around in the French Quarter. And the reason for all of that is crime inside the French Quarter keeps the tourist out, and the powers that be, they ain't having any of that inside the French Quarter. So when this bar manager was killed, the political powers, they took notice big time. And the first thing they wanted to figure out was what led to this public killing. Well, the victim in this case was a guy by the name of Curtis Matthews. Curtis Matthews had a brother. His name was John Matthews. Now, John Matthews incidentally owned that bar on South Claiborne. He had been shot 17 times while in his home prior to the murder of his brother. And the reason for that was John Matthews was set to testify against Telly Hankton in a murder trial in the death of a 23-year-old. His name was Darnell Stewart. He was shot 3 years prior to John Matthews' brother getting shot, Curtis, in front of the same bar. Now, miraculously, John Matthews, despite being shot 17 times, he did survive, but it wasn't hard for NOPD to put together the pieces of the puzzle. They knew what time it was, and when Curtis Matthews got killed, they instantly knew that Telly Hankton was behind it. Mitch Landrieu actually said at that press conference, quote, "I'm sending this message to Telly Hankton and his family and anyone else associated with this. We are coming for you." So if you notice, Landrieu specifically said Telly Hankton and his family. And that's because Telly Hankton at this point, he was head of a criminal organization where many of his direct family members were involved. Nakia Hankton, Shirley Hankton, Thomas Hankton, Andre Hankton, Troy Hankton, and numerous others, most in their 30s. There were 13 in all that would be indicted by the feds using RICO just a year later. So federal prosecutors would claim that Telly Hankton had built a criminal enterprise. Now, he took over this enterprise from a relative of his and kind of a mentor, and he went by the nickname Cup. But for the prior 6 years, as a matter of fact, in 2006, out of his house on Josephine Street in what's known as the Central City area of New Orleans, he built a $43 million empire. So, interesting side note. One of those names I just mentioned above as being indicted was Troy Hankton. And Troy was actually recruited and received a full scholarship to play football for arguably the best coach in college football history, Nick Saban, at LSU. He actually went there, but it didn't work out for him because he had some medical issues. He ended up transferring to Southern and left Southern shortly thereafter. He returned to New Orleans, and you got to live up to the name, right? I actually watched an interview with Troy Hankton recently, and this guy, he's actually really put together and seems to be squared away. Not what you would expect, so you may want to check that out if you get some time. Just search it on YouTube. But back to it, according to federal prosecutors starting in 2006, a bona fide turf war was going down in the Josephine Street area. In Telly Hankton, and y'all, this is a year post-Katrina, right? Telly is hanging out on Josephine Street, and there's a drive-by shooting and an attempt to kill him when he is shot at. And it was not long at all before Telly figured out who was behind it. I mean, the streets talk. All you got to do is ask questions, especially when you're Telly Hankton. And come to find out, it was a rival by the name of Darvin Bessie. So a week later, Darvin Bessie is shot and killed allegedly by Telly on MLK Boulevard in New Orleans. Now, word on the street was, at the time, if you shoot at the king, don't miss. And the king at that time was Telly Hankton. Then, 2 months later, in June of 2006, Telly Hankton's name surfaced nationally when 5 teenagers were shot dead at the corner of Josephine Street and Daniel Street. And because this took place on the corner of Josephine, Telly's name would surface. He ran Josephine Street in New Orleans, he and his family. Now, eventually, an associate of the Hanktons, it was a guy named Mike Anderson, he would take the rap for the killings. But the feds, even to this day, they say that Telly was the one who fired a total of 21 bullets into these teens. In 2007, a rival gang, they decide they want to make a run to what's known as a very popular snowball stand in that area of New Orleans, and it's known as a Red Rooster. Now, what they did not know at the time was that the Hanktons were there. As a matter of fact, Troy and Telly Hankton were there at the time. So they pull in, Telly Hankton spots them, he alerts Troy, and allegedly they ambushed the 3 men as they were leaving the Red Rooster. Now, only one of the 3, a man by the name of Kareem Peters, was hit by any gunfire. But this is the streets again, and this would not be the end of that. Now, incidentally, again, Telly Hankton, former LSU football player, was allegedly involved in that. So about 3 months later, as you would expect, payback ensues when George Cup Hankton, the guy who was the mentor for Telly, he was a cousin of his. He was washing his car at a car wash in that area, and he was shot dead by the same 3 men that were shot at by the Hanktons outside of the Red Rooster snowball stand.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. So all of that led to the killing in 2008 at the Daiquiri Bar that led to the 17 shots fired into the owner of that Daiquiri Bar years later when he was set to testify against Telly. And that led to Curtis Matthews getting killed in front of that Daiquiri Bar. And that led to Mayor Mitch Landrieu calling out the Hanktons in 2011. And that led to the indictments of 13 members of the Hankton family and close associates in 2012 of RICO charges. Now, when they got indicted, Telly had 9 counts. Thomas Hankton also had 9 counts. A guy by the name of Walter Porter, who went by Urkel, of all things, he was the lead assassin, allegedly, for the Hanktons, and he had 14 counts against him. Even Telly's mother, Shirley, was indicted for lying to a federal grand jury. So what happened? So we're going to get into the indictments just quickly. I'm going to tell you what happened to these guys. Telly Hankton, as head of the organization, he received a federal life sentence for convictions that included 3 counts of murder in aid of racketeering. And that was in addition to a separate state life sentence he was already serving for the 2008 murder of Darnell Stewart. Andre Hankton, who is Telly's cousin, he received a life sentence, though some of his convictions were later vacated on appeal. He had been found guilty of using a firearm to cause a death in connection with the murder of Darnell Stewart. Kevin Jackson got sentenced to life in prison. He was convicted for his role in the murder of Jesse Reed, who was another Hankton rival. Walter Urkel Porter, the hitman for the gang that I told you was kind of their go-to guy, he was given federal life sentences for his conviction on numerous charges, all 14 that he was indicted, including multiple murders in aid of racketeering. Shirley Hankton, Telly Hankton's mother, she pleaded guilty to racketeering and was sentenced to 60 months, 5 years in prison. Thomas Hankton, a key leader in the drug dealing operation, he pleaded guilty to racketeering and other charges, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, that was later reduced to 20 years, and he had a lot of time served there. Troy Hankton, the former LSU player and the cousin of Telly Hankton that I've told you about, he pleaded guilty to firearms conspiracy. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison. He's now out of prison. Julius Hankton, in a separate case, was sentenced to 40 years in prison for a 2014 manslaughter charge. An interesting side note on him, he was actually found dead in his cell in Hunt Correctional Center. I never could find out the exact cause of death, but I'll let you use your imagination on that. Nakia Hankton, she was sentenced to 132 months, 11 years in prison for racketeering and drug conspiracy. Another associate by the name of Derek Smothers, he received a net sentence of 14 years, and Terrell Smothers was sentenced to 12 years in prison for racketeering, and those were associates of the Hanktons. So there you have that. I wanted to bring you, I know it's a little bit short. Believe me, I could do a series a mile long on these guys, but I had somebody reach out and they just wanted information on who the Hanktons were. So I wanted to bring you that today. They were a very big deal in New Orleans as it relates to crime in the mid-2000s and early 2000s. Most now in prison or have served some serious prison time. And to move on to something else that somebody asked me to cover on Bloody Angola, and that is the fact that Angola is being used as an ICE facility as of right now. And I'm going to read you just a few breaking headlines that came out in September regarding this because I haven't covered it. And the first one is from the Louisiana Illuminator. This was on September 3rd of this year. It says a section of the Louisiana State Penitentiary undergoing emergency repairs is being used to house immigration and custom enforcement detainees. That from Governor Jeff Landrieu. Jeff Landrieu said the facility will house the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens arrested by ICE. A complex at the state prison is already being used to house 51 detainees and has a total capacity of 416. Joining Landrieu at the prison to make the announcement were U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and ICE Deputy Director Madison Sheehan, who previously served as Landrieu's Wildlife and Fisheries Secretary. Quote, Louisiana, you're going to be an example for the rest of the country. That from the AG. Landrieu declared a state of emergency in late July to allow an expedited repair of Camp J at Angola. This 4-building complex has been closed permanently since 2018, with its only use as a quarantine site during COVID-19. And I've done an episode on Camp J, just search back. And that was a pretty wild place back in the day. Neither the governor nor Noem shared whether the facility will be used as a post-conviction facility or as another ICE detention center where detainees await charges or trial. The detainees will join more than 4,000 inmates at Louisiana State Penitentiary, which stands on the site of a former slave plantation that is a still working farm today. It goes on to say the Camp J section of the prison where ICE detainees are being held was once known as the dungeon. It was designated as solitary confinement to segregate prisoners for disciplinary reasons. Prison officials closed it 7 years ago after its cell locks malfunctioned, allowing inmates to evade security checks. Dozens of weapons were discovered after its closure, and more than 80 prison employees quit, retired, or were fired related to misconduct at Camp J. Though it was rumored Camp J will be renamed Camp 47 to honor President Donald Trump, it has still instead been renamed Camp 57 in honor of Landrieu, who is the 57th governor of Louisiana. The governor also referred to the facility as Louisiana Lockup, a title that was featured prominently on an oversized license plate that adorned the lectern he, Bondi, and Noem used at the press conference. Landrieu's emergency order in late July suspended state procurement code and public bid law to allow officials to secure any materials or amend any contracts needed to respond to emergencies. Despite being asked by multiple reporters, Landrieu would not disclose how much money the state spent on renovations or operations or whether the federal government would reimburse the state for any cost. So that comes out. And it looks like some detainees are going to be locked up there. And they were indeed locked up there. And it wasn't long before they determined they didn't like Bloody Angola that much. And a headline came out. It said 19 detainees launch hunger strike at Angola ICE facility. And that from an advocacy group. This was from WAB Baton Rouge. It said 19 people detained at the Louisiana ICE Processing Center in Camp J at the Louisiana State Penitentiary have entered the 4th day of a hunger strike. This according to a press release from the Southeast Dignity Not Detention Coalition, that's a mouthful, and the National Immigration Project. The group stated that the detainees are requesting medical and mental health care, access to prescription medication, and basic necessities, including toilet paper, hygiene products, and clean water. They are also seeking visitation from ICE officers to address concerns about conditions inside of the facility. According to the release, detainees were recently moved into Camp J, a unit shut down in 2018, and advocates say the facility lacks essential services, including a law library and religious programming. Some detainees with chronic health conditions are reportedly not receiving medications. The organization said the Angola facility was reopened earlier this month as part of an expansion, and we got into all that, so I won't get into that again. You know, when you get these press releases and they're from advocacy groups, got to kind of take a lot of that with a grain of salt. I'm sure maybe they were doing hunger strikes, but officials, they jumped on it pretty quick on these allegations of a hunger strike and especially the inhumane conditions. And they had a response. They said recent misleading reports about the detainee treatment at Louisiana Lockup and Camp 57 are unacceptable and creating a false narrative about the facility's operations. There was no hunger strike before the news outlets reported one, officials said. On Sunday, after the reports emerged, 17 detainees refused their meals, though only 3 continued to do so by Monday afternoon, according to the statement. So they thought that was a good idea till they really got hungry. This action appears to be sparked by false narratives in the media that put that idea in the detainees' heads, the statement said. Southeast Dignity Not Detention Coalition maintained that a hunger strike is ongoing. Quote, these men detained in Camp J are bravely and with great thought and intention putting their lives on the line to advocate for their rights, the group said in a statement, using the former name of the prison wing being used to house ICE detainees. So Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin also denied the advocacy group's allegations in a statement that she released. She said, here are the facts. There is no hunger strike at Louisiana Lockup. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time, nor will it be the last, that the media repeats unsubstantiated false allegations peddled by criminal illegal aliens about detention facilities. By the way, this facility is housing the, and it's all in caps, worst of the worst, including murderers, pedophiles, and rapists. Last week, before news of the hunger strike emerged, the Department of Public Safety referred inquiries about Camp 57 to ICE. Though Camp 57 is located in Angola, which is operated by the state, officials have said it is being run by ICE contractors, though they have not publicly identified what company is doing so. LaSalle Corrections, a company that runs multiple ICE facilities in Louisiana, recently published job postings in St. Francisville, near Angola. An executive for that firm did not return requests for comments. Officials, including Jeff Landrieu, have promised the facility is only for the worst of the worst. 51 detainees were moved to the facility upon its opening, that according to the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE, and the agency said the detainees had been convicted of serious crimes such as homicide, rape, and sexual abuse of children. Federal and state officials have not answered recent questions about who else had been moved to the facility over the past several weeks. So there you have that. And to that person that reached out to me, now you have your update on the ICE situation as it relates to Bloody Angola. Quickly, big time shit coming up on a podcast. I know a lot of you out there also listen to Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings. We got something big dropping the first week in November, and that is a multiple part series. I believe it's 20 episodes. It is already done. All we're doing is the back end stuff on that right now. It is called DTL. Of course, it covers the life and crimes of maybe Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola's most infamous inmate, or definitely one of the most, and that is Derek Todd Lee, also known as the Louisiana serial killer, the Baton Rouge serial killer. He's about as evil a human being as you would ever come across. His crimes absolutely horrific, and no one can tell that story better than Kelly Jennings. So I'm going to play you quickly the trailer for this. This series drops every Monday on Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings, and it starts November 3rd, and here's that trailer.
In the sultry heat of Louisiana, where the bayous whisper secrets and the air hangs heavy with the scent of magnolias. A darkness lurked beneath the surface. Derek Todd Lee was a man whose charm masked a sinister reality. He was a monster. Lee, a seemingly ordinary man with a disarming smile, led a double life that would unravel in a series of murders in the capital city of Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas. As the first reports of disappearances and murders began to surface, South Louisiana was thrust into a nightmare, igniting a frantic search for answers. The true horror was just beginning, and the hunt for a serial killer, eventually known by just 3 letters, would reveal not only the depths of Derek Todd Lee's depravity, but also the resilience of those most affected by his evil acts, the families and the survivors. This is DTL.
Now, as you noticed, you heard that music behind it. The way I describe this is like listening to a Netflix documentary. It's very highly produced. We spared no expense on this one. Some of these things, due to my time constraints, I actually hired out some of the production of these episodes. They're very highly produced, professionally produced, and they're coming your way. First time we've ever done this with this large of a series. And I'm telling you, it is absolute fire. You're going to want to hear it. Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings, brings you DTL November 3rd. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening to Bloody Angola. If you are a Patreon supporter, I can't tell you how much I love and appreciate you. This show would not exist, without your continued support. Thank you so much for allowing me to do what I do with Bloody Angola. And until next time, for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison, I'm Jim Chapman. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang,